The emergency broadcast cut through every communication channel in the Galactic Council chamber. Screams filled the air, mixed with the sound of explosions and the horrible screeching noise that could only mean one thing. The Ravager swarm had found another victim. Ambassador Torin pressed his 6 fingers against the console, trying to stabilize the incoming signal. The holographic display flickered, showing a mining colony on the edge of the outer reach. Buildings burned. Ships tried to escape but were caught mid-flight by black, insect-like vessels that moved in perfect coordination. The colonists were Volandi people, the same peaceful species as Torin. His heart sank as he watched his own kind die light years away. "How long until the defense fleet arrives?" someone shouted from across the chamber. The military coordinator, a 4-armed Brecken named Voss, checked his data screens. His expression said everything before his words did. 17 days at maximum speed. The nearest battle group is 3 sectors away. 17 days. The colony would be nothing but dust and bones by then. Everyone in the chamber knew it. The Ravager swarm did not take prisoners. They did not negotiate. They consumed everything organic and moved on, leaving dead worlds behind them. For 200 years, the Council had fought them. For 200 years, the Council had mostly lost. "We could send a message to the Kryn Empire," suggested a reptilian delegate. "They have ships closer to that region." Voss shook his head. "The Kryn will debate for 3 days before deciding. You know how their bureaucracy works." The chamber fell into desperate silence. On the holographic display, another transport ship exploded. Torin could see small figures floating in space, their life signs winking out one by one. He wanted to close his eyes but forced himself to watch. These were his people. They deserved to be witnessed in their final moments. What about the humans? Every head in the chamber turned toward the speaker. Rebecca Torres stood near the back of the room, her hand raised. She was tall for her species, with dark skin and eyes that seemed to calculate everything around her. Humans had joined the Galactic Council only 3 years ago, barely enough time to set up proper embassies. Most species still did not know what to make of them. "The humans?" Voss repeated, as if he had misheard. "Our fleet completed construction 2 months ago," Rebecca said, walking toward the center of the chamber. "We have been running patrol exercises near the 7th quadrant. That puts us approximately 4 light years from the colony." A wave of murmuring spread through the assembled delegates. The Threen ambassador, a being of pure energy contained in a crystalline shell, flickered with what might have been concern. "Your fleet is untested in real combat. The Ravager swarm has destroyed entire armadas." "Then we will be tested now," Rebecca replied simply. Torin studied the human ambassador. Her species was strange. They stood upright on 2 legs like his own people. But there was something different in the way they moved. Something purposeful, predatory even. He had read the reports about Earth, about how it was classified as a Class 7 death world. Only 12 other planets in the known galaxy earned that rating. Most species that evolved on such harsh worlds never made it to space travel. They either went extinct or destroyed themselves in tribal warfare. Humans had somehow done both and survived anyway. "How many ships do you have?" Voss asked, clearly skeptical. 47 combat vessels, 3 carriers, 12 destroyers, 28 corvettes, 4 supply freighters. The Brecken coordinator made a noise that might have been a laugh. "The Ravager swarm has over 3,000 vessels surrounding that colony. Your fleet will be torn apart in minutes." Rebecca did not flinch. "Will you send us the colony coordinates or not? Every second we debate is another second those people die." "This is foolish," the Threen ambassador said. "The Council cannot authorize a suicide mission. We would be sending the human fleet to certain death." "You are not sending us," Rebecca corrected. "We are volunteering." "There is a difference." Torin found himself speaking before he fully realized it. "I vote yes. Let the humans try." His voice cracked slightly. Those were his people down there. His own genetic cousins being slaughtered. If there was even the smallest chance, he had to take it. The vote moved quickly after that. 12 species voted yes. 8 voted no. 3 abstained. It was enough. Voss transmitted the coordinates to Rebecca's personal device. "Your fleet will need to achieve faster than light speeds we have only theorized about. Even with the best Council engines, you will arrive too late." "Our engines are not Council engines," Rebecca said. She tapped her communication badge. "Torres to Fleet Command. Execute emergency response protocol. Authorization code Predator Awakening." A voice responded immediately from her badge. "Fleet Command confirms. All ships entering combat preparation. Jump calculations complete. We will reach the colony in 43 minutes. 43 minutes. The entire chamber went silent. That was impossible. No known ship could cross 4 light-years in 43 minutes. The physics did not work. The mathematics did not allow it. How? Voss whispered. Rebecca smiled, but it was not a warm expression. It reminded Torin of the battle vids he had seen of apex predators on various worlds. The smile of something that knew it was about to hunt. Humanity spent 10,000 years learning to kill each other, she said quietly. We got very good at building things that move fast and hit hard. When we finally stopped fighting ourselves, we took all those lessons and pointed them outward. She turned to leave the chamber, then paused at the doorway. Keep this channel open. I want the council to see what humans do when someone calls for help. The holographic display shifted. New signals appeared, patching through from human fleet transponders. Torin watched as 47 combat vessels aligned themselves in space, their formation strange and asymmetrical, nothing like the orderly battle groups the council used. These ships moved like a pack, not an army. The lead vessel, a destroyer called the Relentless, began to glow. Energy signatures spiked to levels that should have torn the ship apart. Instead, space itself seemed to bend around the hull. One by one, the other ships followed suit. Reality twisted and compressed, and then the entire human fleet simply vanished. They did not jump through hyperspace. They did not use traditional faster-than-light drives. They tore a hole in space and stepped through it like walking through a doorway. Voss checked his instruments 3 times, certain they were malfunctioning. Impossible. The energy readings just before they jumped. That amount of power could destroy a moon. They weaponized it instead, the Threen ambassador observed. The chamber settled into tense waiting. 43 minutes. Torin kept his eyes on the colony feed. The Ravagers were already landing ground forces. He could see the hive warriors spreading through the streets, their razor-sharp limbs cutting through anything that moved. Then, exactly 43 minutes after they left, space tore open above the colony. The human fleet emerged not in a careful, calculated exit from hyperspace, but in an aggressive burst that sent ripples of energy across every sensor in the system. The Ravager swarm had been hunting unopposed for hours. Their vessels surrounded the colony in a thick cloud of black chitin and organic weapons. 3,000 ships, all connected by the hive mind, all moving with perfect coordination. They turned as one to face the newcomers. 3,000 vessels against 47. Rebecca's voice came through the communication channel, calm and cold. This is Commander Rebecca Torres of the Human Deep Space Response Fleet to any surviving colonists. Help has arrived. Stay in your shelters. This will get loud. Torin leaned forward, hardly breathing. The human ships did not form a defensive line. They did not cluster together for mutual protection. Instead, they scattered in every direction, breaking apart like a pack of predators surrounding prey. The Ravager swarm surged forward in their traditional overwhelming mass, ready to consume this tiny new fleet like they had consumed hundreds before. But the humans did not run. They did not hesitate. They accelerated directly into the swarm, weapons already firing, and Torin realized with a cold shock that the Ravagers had just made a terrible mistake. They had not surrounded prey. They had surrounded predators. The first human corvette vanished from every sensor in the Galactic Council chamber. One moment it was there, speeding toward a cluster of Ravager fighters. The next moment, nothing. No explosion, no debris. Just gone. Did they lose a ship already? Someone asked. Voss frantically checked his instruments. No, wait. I am still receiving its transponder signal, but I cannot see it. It is like the ship stopped existing but is still there. On the holographic display, Ravager vessels swarmed the space where the corvette had been. They fired their organic weapons into empty space, hitting nothing. Then from within their own formation, explosions began. The invisible corvette was among them, firing at point-blank range, and the Ravagers could not see it to fight back. Stealth technology, the Threen ambassador whispered. But that level of energy suppression should be impossible. 3 more human corvettes disappeared from sensors. They reappeared seconds later in completely different positions, having moved through the battlefield like ghosts. The Ravager swarm tried to adapt, firing randomly into space, but the humans were already gone by the time the shots arrived. Commander Marcus Webb stood in the command center of the destroyer Relentless, watching the tactical display with cold focus. Around him, His crew worked with practiced efficiency. No panic, no hesitation. They had trained for this scenario 1,000 times in simulations. The only difference was that now the enemies were real. Corvette Group Alpha, continue hit-and-run pattern, he ordered. Do not let them predict your movements. Corvette Group Beta, swing wide and come up through the asteroid field. Use the debris for cover. His tactical officer, a woman named Amara Okonkwo, glanced up from her station. Sir, the Ravagers are trying to form a sphere formation around the colony. If they complete it, nothing gets in or out. Then we break it before they finish. All destroyers target the formation gaps. I want concentrated fire on sections 7 and 12. Once we punch through, the carriers launch all fighters. The human destroyers moved like sharks through water, smooth and lethal. Their weapons were not the elegant energy beams the Council species favored. Human weapons were crude by comparison. Railguns that fired solid metal slugs at relativistic speeds. Missile pods that could overwhelm defensive systems through sheer volume. And something the Council had never seen before. Weapons that fired streams of superheated plasma contained in magnetic bottles. The plasma weapons hit a Ravager cruiser broadside. The organic armor that had protected the ship from conventional energy weapons melted like wax under a flame. The ship broke apart, spilling its hive warriors into space. More human weapons spoke. Metal slugs traveling at a fraction of light speed punched through Ravager hulls, entering one side and exiting the other, sometimes passing through multiple ships before finally losing momentum. The mathematics of kinetic energy did not care about shields or armor. Force equaled mass times acceleration, and humans had maximized both variables. In the colony below, survivors huddled in emergency shelters. They had been preparing for death, saying final prayers to their various gods. Now they watched through small windows as the sky above them turned into a war zone, unlike anything in recorded history. A young Valandi named Cress pressed her face against the shelter window. She had never seen human ships before. The Council vessels she knew were built with smooth lines and elegant curves, designed as much for beauty as function. Human ships looked different, angular, aggressive. Every surface bristled with weapons. There was no beauty in their design, only pure, brutal efficiency. Why do they fight so strange? Her father asked, watching a human corvette weave through Ravager fire with impossible agility. The Council fleets form lines and trade fire. These humans are everywhere at once. An older Valandi, someone who had studied alien species as a hobby, spoke up from the corner. I read about Earth once. Their world was cruel. For millions of years, survival meant learning to hunt and learning to avoid being hunted. Those instincts are still in them. Outside, a human carrier released its fighter craft. 50 small vessels poured out, moving in groups of 5. They did not fly in neat formations. They moved like a flock of birds, responding to each other with instinctive coordination. When one fighter dove, the others covered it. When one pulled back, another took its place. They flowed around each other like water, always moving, never staying still long enough to become an easy target. The Ravagers tried to swarm the fighters, using their superior numbers to overwhelm. It was a tactic that had worked for centuries. But the human fighters did not panic when surrounded. They fought harder, their pilots pushing their craft to limits that would have terrified Council species. One fighter, pursued by a dozen Ravager vessels, dove straight toward the planet's surface. The Ravagers followed, thinking they had cornered their prey. At the last possible second, the human pilot pulled up, using the planet's gravity and atmosphere to assist the turn. The maneuver generated enough G-force to kill most organic beings. The human survived and accelerated away. The Ravagers, unable to match the turn, slammed into the upper atmosphere. Some burned up immediately. Others managed to pull away but were now scattered and disorganized. The surviving human pilot did not run. She turned around and attacked the confused Ravagers, destroying 3 before they could reform. Back in the Council chamber, Torin watched in stunned silence. The humans were outnumbered 60-1. By every logical calculation, they should have been destroyed in the first 5 minutes of combat. Instead, they were winning. How are they doing this? Voss asked no one in particular. The Ravager swarm has destroyed fleets 10 times larger. Because those fleets fought like civilized beings, the Threen ambassador said slowly. They followed rules of engagement. They used established tactics. They fought with honor, the energy being paused. Humans are not fighting with honor. They are fighting to win. A human corvette emerged from stealth directly behind a Ravager hive ship. Instead of targeting the engines or weapons like Council doctrine taught, the corvette fired everything at a small, seemingly insignificant section of the hull. The concentrated fire breached the armor and penetrated deep into the ship's interior. The hive ship went dark. Not destroyed, but paralyzed. Dead in space. What did they hit? Someone asked. Amara Okonkwo's voice came through the open communication channel. She was explaining something to rescued colonists aboard one of the human ships. Every Ravager hive ship has a central neural cluster. It coordinates all the smaller vessels connected to it. Destroy the cluster, and you cut off several hundred ships from the hive mind at once. How did you discover this? A colonist asked, voice shaking. We studied every battle report the Council had on the Ravagers, watched thousands of hours of combat footage, analyzed their movement patterns. It took our tactical computers about 3 weeks to identify the weak point. 3 weeks. The Council had been fighting the Ravagers for 200 years and never found that weakness. Humans had identified it in 3 weeks simply by watching and learning. More hive ships went dark as human vessels targeted the neural clusters with surgical precision. Without coordination from the hive mind, the smaller Ravager ships became confused. They were not individuals capable of independent thought. They were cells in a larger organism, and that organism was being systematically lobotomized. Marcus Webb watched the tactical display shift in humanity's favor. The sphere formation the Ravagers had tried to create was broken. Human forces had punched through in 4 places, creating corridors for the surviving colonists to evacuate through. All transport vessels, begin extraction operations, he ordered. I want every living being off that colony in the next 30 minutes. Fighter groups provide escort. Destroyers maintain pressure on the swarm. Do not let them regroup. A new voice entered the communication channel. It was Jackson Rivers, a fighter pilot who had already destroyed 11 Ravager vessels. Commander, I have a problem. My fighter took damage. Engines are failing. I am drifting toward a cluster of Ravager cruisers. Marcus checked the display. Jackson's fighter was indeed drifting, and there were no friendly vessels close enough to assist. The Ravagers were already moving to capture or destroy the crippled craft. Can you eject? Marcus asked. Negative, sir. Ejection system is damaged, but I still have weapons and full fuel tanks. There was a pause. Everyone listening knew what that meant. Marcus closed his eyes briefly, then opened them again. Jackson, are you certain? Confirmed, sir. I can see a transport full of colonists on my display. It is heading for the extraction point. These Ravager cruisers are moving to intercept it. If they get past me, those civilians die. Marcus wanted to find another option. He wanted to save his pilot. But the mathematics were cold and clear. 1 life versus 300 lives. 1 fighter versus 5 cruisers. 1 soldier who volunteered versus innocent civilians who had no choice. The fleet honors your sacrifice, pilot, Marcus said quietly. Make it count. Always do, sir. Rivers out. The crippled fighter turned toward the approaching Ravager cruisers. Its weapons opened fire, drawing their attention. The cruisers, seeing an easy kill, moved to surround it. Jackson waited until they were close, then detonated his fuel tanks. The explosion vaporized his fighter and severely damaged all 5 cruisers. The transport full of colonists flew past unmolested, heading for the extraction point. In the council chamber, several delegates gasped. Torin felt his heart's ache. That human had chosen to die so others could live, not because he was ordered to, but because he calculated that his death had value. Barbarians, someone muttered. They treat life so cheaply, but Torin disagreed. He had seen the expression on Marcus Webb's face when he authorized that sacrifice. Humans did not treat life cheaply. They understood its exact value and were willing to pay it when necessary. That was not barbarism. That was something far more frightening. That was discipline. 20 years before the battle, a group of human military leaders sat in a bunker deep beneath the surface of Earth. They were not politicians. They were soldiers, engineers, and strategists who had been asked a simple question by the newly formed Human Space Command. How do we fight a war in space? General Victoria Cross had been the one to answer. She was 70 years old with gray hair and scars from 3 different planetary conflicts. She had fought in jungles, deserts, frozen wastelands, and urban ruins. She had seen every kind of warfare humans had invented for killing each other. We start by understanding what we are, she had said, standing before a holographic display of Earth. Every other species in the galaxy evolved as prey animals or herd creatures. They think in terms of groups and cooperation, Because that is what kept them alive. We are different. She had pressed a button, and the hologram changed to show the African savanna 2 million years ago. Early humans, barely more than apes, moved across the grassland. They were not the strongest predators, not the fastest, not the best armed by nature, but they were persistent. They followed wounded prey for days until it collapsed from exhaustion. They worked in groups to bring down animals 10 times their size. We are pursuit predators, Victoria had continued. We evolved to chase, to track, to outlast. And when our prey tried to fight back, we learned to think like them, to predict them, to trap them. That is what made us apex predators on a death world. Not strength, not speed. Our ability to understand our enemy and adapt faster than they can. The presentation had continued for 3 hours. By the end, the foundation for humanity's entire space combat doctrine had been laid. Ships would be fast and maneuverable, capable of sustained pursuit. Weapons would be overwhelming and varied, adapted to any situation. Tactics would be fluid, changing based on enemy behavior. And most importantly, no fight would be fair. Humans would use every advantage, every dirty trick, every lesson learned from 10,000 years of warfare. Now, those principles were being tested against the Ravager swarm. Aboard the transport vessel Sanctuary, rescued colonists sat in the cargo bay, wrapped in emergency blankets. They were alive, but many were injured. Medical teams moved among them, offering treatment. The humans worked with quiet efficiency, asking questions in simple trade language, using hand gestures when words failed. A Valandi child named Cress sat with her father, watching a human medic treat a wound on her arm. The medic's name was Amara Okonkwo, though she had introduced herself simply as "Call me Doc." She worked quickly, cleaning the wound and applying synthetic skin that would help it heal faster. "Why did your ships attack so strangely?" Cress asked, her voice small. "The Ravagers had so many more. I thought you would die like the Council fleets always do." Amara finished bandaging the wound before answering. She looked at the child with kind eyes, but there was something in that gaze that made Cress shiver. Something ancient and predatory. "Can I tell you a story about Earth?" Amara asked. Cress nodded. "A long time ago, my ancestors lived in a place with many dangerous animals. Lions, hyenas, crocodiles, all of them bigger and stronger than humans. But humans survived because we learned to think differently. When a lion attacked the village, we did not fight it face to face. We tracked it back to its den. We studied how it hunted, when it slept, what it feared. Then we used that knowledge to defeat it. But the Ravagers are not animals," Cress said. "They are smart. They work together." "So did we," Amara replied. "Humans have been fighting each other for our entire history. We learned every way to kill, every way to destroy, every way to win. Wars between nations. Wars between cities. Wars between families. We got very, very good at it." She paused. "Then about 100 years ago, we almost destroyed ourselves. Nuclear weapons. Biological plagues. We came very close to extinction." "That is terrible," Cress whispered. "It was," Amara agreed. "But we survived. And we learned something important. All that knowledge we had about destroying each other, all those weapons and tactics and strategies, we could use them to protect instead of harm. When we met the Galactic Council and learned about the Ravagers, we saw an enemy that thought it was unbeatable. We saw an enemy that needed to learn it was wrong. Outside the transport, the battle continued. Human vessels moved through the Ravager formation like wolves through a flock of sheep. They did not target randomly. Every shot was calculated. Every maneuver had purpose. Marcus Webb had implemented Protocol Apex, a combat strategy developed specifically for hive-mind enemies. The protocol had a simple philosophy: cut off the head and the body dies. Every Ravager hive ship became a priority target. Human forces focused their fire, overwhelming one ship at a time with concentrated strikes. The Ravagers, controlled by a collective intelligence, could not adapt fast enough. They had spent centuries fighting enemies that distributed their fire evenly across all targets. Humans ignored that doctrine entirely. They sacrificed efficiency for effectiveness, pouring everything into single points until they broke. A Ravager hive ship tried to flee, its neural cluster damaged but still functional. A human destroyer pursued it, firing continuously. The hive ship had greater mass and should have been able to absorb more damage. But the human vessel targeted the same spot again and again, widening the breach with each hit until the neural cluster was exposed to space. One more shot, and the hive ship went completely dark. 47 smaller Ravager vessels connected to that ship lost coordination. They drifted in space, confused and helpless. Human fighters swept through them quickly, eliminating the threat. In the council chamber, delegates watched the battle unfold with growing unease. They had expected the humans to die heroically. Instead, they were winning systematically. They are using psychological warfare, the Threen ambassador observed. Look at their broadcast frequencies. Voss switched the chamber's audio feed to pick up what the humans were transmitting into open space. Strange sounds filled the air. Howls, roars, screeches. Predator calls from 1,000 different Earth species, mixed with electronic distortion and subsonic frequencies. What is the purpose of this noise? Someone asked. The Ravagers are a hive mind, Voss explained slowly. They communicate through biological signals. These sounds are interfering with their coordination. The humans are not just fighting them. They are confusing them, frightening them. Can a hive mind feel fear? Torin wondered aloud. As if in answer, the Ravager swarm began to pull back. Not a coordinated retreat, but a panicked withdrawal. Ships broke formation and fled in different directions. The hive mind had encountered something it had never experienced before. An enemy that hunted it with the same merciless efficiency it used on others. Human vessels pursued without hesitation. There would be no mercy, no quarter given. The Ravagers had come to this system to consume everything. Now they would learn what it meant to be consumed. A small group of Ravager fighters tried to hide in the debris field of destroyed ships. Human sensors found them anyway. Stealth corvettes materialized from nowhere and eliminated them one by one. There was no place to hide from an enemy that had spent thousands of years hunting its own kind through every terrain imaginable. Marcus Webb stood in his command center, watching the Ravagers break. He felt no satisfaction, no joy in the violence, only cold determination to finish what had been started. All ships maintain pursuit, he ordered. No Ravager vessel leaves this system. We end this threat here and now. His tactical officer looked up, concerned. Sir, the Council protocols state that defeated enemies should be allowed to retreat. It is considered a war crime to pursue a fleeing force. Marcus turned to her and his expression was hard. The Council protocols let the Ravagers destroy 17 colonies in the last decade. How many millions died because someone decided mercy was more important than victory? He looked back at the display. Those protocols end today. We will teach the galaxy a new way to fight. The human fleet spread out across the system, hunting down every remaining Ravager vessel. It was methodical, efficient, brutal, and it was working. Torin watched from the council chamber and felt a chill run through his body. The humans were not just winning a battle. They were demonstrating a fundamental truth that the galaxy had forgotten. Sometimes survival required not just defending yourself, but ensuring your enemy could never threaten you again. The Ravager swarm, which had terrorized this region of space for 2 centuries, was being systematically dismantled by a species that had only been in space for 3 generations. The mathematics should have been impossible. The outcome should have been certain. But humans had looked at those calculations and decided the numbers were wrong. They had brought their own mathematics to the battlefield. Equations written in blood and steel over thousands of years of constant warfare. And those equations were proving far more accurate than anything the Council had ever developed. As the last Ravager hive ship in the immediate area exploded, Marcus Webb allowed himself a small moment of rest. But only a moment. The battle for the colony was won, but the war was far from over. Somewhere in this system, the main Ravager command vessel was hiding, the ship that controlled all the others. The true apex of the swarm. Launch reconnaissance drones, Marcus ordered. Find me their queen. We are not done here. The reconnaissance drones found the trail 3 hours after the initial battle ended. A massive energy signature moving away from the colony at maximum speed, leaving a trail of radiation that human sensors could follow like breadcrumbs. The Ravager Queen ship was running. Admiral Victoria Cross arrived in the system aboard the carrier Indomitable just as the pursuit began. She was the architect of human space combat doctrine, and she wanted to see her theories tested against the galaxy's most dangerous enemy. Her silver hair was tied back in a tight bun, and her uniform displayed 40 years of service medals. She had earned every one of them in blood. Marcus Webb's face appeared on her communication screen. He looked tired but focused. Admiral, the Queen ship is heading toward the nebular barrier. If it reaches the thick gas clouds, we will lose it on sensors. Then we do not let it reach the clouds, Victoria replied simply. How many Ravager vessels remain? Approximately 400, all clustering around the Queen ship for protection. They are reforming into a defensive sphere. Victoria studied the tactical display. The Ravagers were doing exactly what she had predicted they would do. Fall back to their strongest asset and protect it at all costs. It was logical, predictable, and it gave her exactly the opening she needed. Prepare the fleet for extended pursuit. We follow them through however many systems it takes. The Ravager swarm ends today one way or another. In the council chamber back on the station, panic had replaced the earlier shock. The vote to authorize human assistance had been for defense of the colony, not an extended military campaign across multiple systems. They must stop, a Brecken delegate insisted. The battle is won. The colony is saved. This pursuit violates 3 different council treaties regarding rules of engagement. Torin listened to the arguments with growing frustration. His people were safe because humans had ignored conventional wisdom. Now those same delegates who had voted to send the humans wanted to tie their hands with regulations written by species that had never won a war against the Ravagers. Perhaps we should let them finish, he said quietly. Every head turned toward him. Torin rarely spoke in council debates, preferring to observe rather than engage. But now, with his people rescued and human soldiers dying to protect the galaxy, he could not stay silent. For 200 years we have fought the Ravagers with honor, he continued. We have followed the rules. We have shown mercy to retreating enemies. And in those 200 years, how many colonies have been destroyed? How many billions have died? He looked around the chamber. The humans are offering to do what we have been too civilized to do. They are offering to win. At what cost? The Threen ambassador asked. We cannot abandon our principles simply because violence is easier. Your principles are luxuries purchased with other people's blood. Victoria Cross's voice cut through the communication channel. She had been listening to the council debate and decided to join it. My species spent 10,000 years killing each other before we finally learned peace. We know exactly what violence costs because we paid that price over and over. But we also learned that sometimes the cost of mercy is higher. She transmitted a data file to the council chamber. It appeared on the holographic display, showing a list of colonies the Ravagers had attacked in the past decade. 17 settlements. Each one had received some form of council assistance. Each one had seen Ravager forces driven off or forced to retreat. And each one had been attacked again within 2 years by the same swarm that had been allowed to escape. You let them go because you thought it was moral, Victoria said, her voice cold as deep space. They came back stronger. They learned your tactics. They adapted. And more people died. That is the price of your mercy. What would you have us do? The Threen ambassador asked. Hunt them to extinction? Become genocidal monsters? The Ravagers are not a species, Victoria replied. They are a weapon. A biological machine designed to consume and expand. They have no culture. No individuals. No potential for peace or change. They exist only to feed. Showing them mercy is like showing mercy to a plague or a fire. It is not moral. It is stupid. The argument continued, but Victoria had already cut her transmission. She had said what needed to be said. Now she had work to do. The Indomitable and its escort fleet moved to join the pursuit, bringing the total human force to 73 combat vessels. The Ravager Queen ship fled through 3 systems over the next 8 hours. Each time human forces got close, it would jump to another system, always heading deeper into uncharted space. The 400 escorts fought desperately, sacrificing themselves to buy time for their queen to escape. Human vessels destroyed them methodically. No dramatic dogfights, no heroic sacrifices needed, just cold, calculated elimination of targets in order of priority. The humans had stopped broadcasting their predator sounds. They did not need psychological warfare anymore. The Ravagers were already terrified. Ambassador Rebecca Torres, who had remained with the fleet, watched the pursuit from the bridge of the Relentless. She recorded everything, knowing the council would demand a full accounting of human actions. Let them see it all, she thought. Let them understand what real warfare looks like. A young navigation officer named David Park spoke up from his station. Ambassador, we have been tracking the Queen ship's heading. If it maintains this course, it will reach the outer veil in approximately 6 hours. Rebecca felt a cold weight settle in her stomach. The outer veil was the edge of charted space. Beyond it, there were no reliable star maps, no known colonies, no council presence. If the Ravager Queen escaped into that unknown territory, it could rebuild its swarm in safety. In 10 years, maybe 20, it would return with numbers the galaxy could not fight. "We cannot let it reach the veil," she said. "We are already at maximum pursuit speed," David replied. "Unless we risk overloading the engines, we cannot catch them before the boundary." Rebecca made a decision that would haunt her for years afterward. Order all support vessels and damaged ships to break off pursuit. Transfer their fuel reserves to the combat-ready destroyers and corvettes. We lighten the fleet and push everything into speed. "That will leave the damaged ships stranded out here," David said carefully. "It could take days for rescue vessels to reach them." "I know." "Do it anyway," the order went out. 12 human vessels, damaged but still mobile, separated from the main fleet. Their crews transferred every drop of fuel they could spare to the ships continuing the pursuit. Then they watched as their comrades accelerated away, pushing their engines beyond safe limits. In one of those stranded ships, a young pilot named Lisa Reeves sat in her cockpit and watched the fleet disappear into the distance. Her fighter had taken damage during the initial battle, and while she could fly, she could not keep up with the pursuit speeds needed. She had given her fuel to her squadron leader, ensuring he could continue the hunt. "Good hunting," she whispered to the empty space. Then she settled in to wait for rescue, hoping the damaged life support would last long enough. The pursuing fleet closed the distance. Human engineers pushed the engines to 110% capacity, then 120%. Metal groaned under the stress. Cooling systems struggled to prevent overheating. Crews worked frantically to keep their ships from tearing apart. But they were gaining. The Ravager Queen ship, burdened by its massive size, could not match the human vessel's desperate speed. Marcus Webb watched the distance counter tick down. 500,000 kilometers, 400,000, 300,000. They were going to catch it. Then the Ravager escorts did something unexpected. All 300 remaining vessels turned as one and accelerated back toward the pursuing humans. They were not trying to fight. They were trying to create a barrier, a wall of ships that would force the humans to slow down or be destroyed in the collision. "All ships, do not slow down," Victoria Cross ordered. "Break through them, whatever it takes." The human fleet did not hesitate. Destroyers opened fire with everything they had, blasting corridors through the Ravager formation. Corvettes dove through the gaps, taking fire from all sides but not stopping. Fighters weaved between the larger vessels, their pilots accepting death as the cost of success. 8 human ships were destroyed in the breakthrough. Over 100 crew members died in those explosions. But the fleet punched through the Ravager barrier and continued pursuit. The math was brutal but simple. 8 ships and 100 lives versus allowing the Ravager Queen to escape and potentially kill billions in the future. Victoria watched her ships die and felt each loss like a physical wound. But she did not order a retreat. She had made this decision years ago, in that bunker beneath Earth when she helped design humanity's approach to space warfare. Some battles required sacrifice. Some victories demanded blood. The Ravager Queen ship was now only 200,000 kilometers ahead. It was close enough that human railguns could begin firing at extreme range. Metal slugs crossed the distance, most missing, but some hitting. The Queen ship's shields flared and held, but each hit drained its power reserves. "Target the engine manifolds," Marcus ordered. "We do not need to destroy it. We just need to slow it down." Human weapons concentrated on the rear of the Queen ship. Railgun slugs, plasma lances, and missile salvos all struck within a few hundred meters of each other. The combined firepower finally overwhelmed the shields. Explosions blossomed across the Queen ship's stern. One of its main engines flickered and died. The massive vessel began to slow. Not much, but enough. The human fleet closed the final distance. Within 30 minutes, they had the Queen ship surrounded, but they did not attack. Not yet. Victoria Cross wanted this enemy to understand something before it died. "This is Admiral Victoria Cross of the Human Space Command to the Ravager Swarm," she broadcast on all frequencies. "You came to that colony expecting easy prey. You have been hunting Council species for 2 centuries, growing fat on their mercy and hesitation, but you made a mistake. You called for help and humans answered." She paused. "We are not like the Council species. We are not prey animals who learn to fight. We are predators who learn to think. And now you will learn what it means to be hunted by something more dangerous than you." The Queen ship tried to run, Its remaining engines flared to maximum power. It fired every weapon it had at the surrounding human vessels. It even attempted to jump to another system, but its damaged engines could not build enough charge. The human fleet closed in, and there was nowhere left to run. The Ravager Queen ship died slowly. Human vessels surrounded it in a sphere formation, their weapons firing in carefully coordinated volleys. They did not want to destroy it too quickly. They wanted every Ravager warrior still connected to the hive mind to feel their queen die, to understand that their greatest strength, their collective consciousness, had become their greatest weakness. When one part of the hive mind experienced death, all parts felt it. The Queen ship's hull cracked open section by section. Internal explosions lit up the darkness of space. The massive vessel, which had taken 2 centuries to grow to its current size, was reduced to burning debris in less than an hour. With its death, the remaining Ravager vessels scattered throughout the system simply stopped. Without the Queen to guide them, they were nothing more than organic machines without programming. Human forces destroyed them quickly, efficiently, and without mercy. In the council chamber, silence had fallen. The delegates had watched the entire pursuit and final battle. They had seen human determination, human sacrifice, and human ruthlessness all combined into a single military campaign. The Ravager swarm, which had been an unsolvable problem since before some of the younger delegates were born, had been eliminated in less than 1 day of human operations. Admiral Victoria Cross's image appeared on the main display. She looked exhausted, standing on the bridge of the Indomitable with smoke still clearing from a fire that had broken out during the final engagement. Behind her, crew members worked to repair damage. She had lost 12 ships total during the campaign. Over 300 human lives ended to save tens of thousands of alien civilians. The Ravager swarm in this sector has been neutralized, she reported, her voice formal and precise. We are beginning rescue operations for our stranded vessels and recovery of our fallen. The colony is secure. All civilians have been evacuated safely. The Threen ambassador flickered with what might have been distress. Admiral Cross, this council must formally protest your actions. The pursuit of defeated enemies violates multiple treaties. The destruction of the Queen ship when it was attempting to flee constitutes a war crime under current galactic law. Victoria's expression did not change. Then change your laws, because what we did today is what survival looks like. You can call it a war crime, but those colonists call it rescue. You can say we were too brutal, but the families of the dead call us heroes. You can hide behind your treaties and protocols, but when the next threat comes, and it will come, those papers will not protect you. You speak as if more violence is inevitable, the ambassador said. It is, Victoria replied flatly. The galaxy is a dangerous place. The Ravagers were not the only threat out there, just the most immediate one. There are other hostile species, other dangers we have not encountered yet. You can choose to face them with your current methods and continue losing, or you can learn from what happened today. Torrin stood up from his seat, his voice carrying across the chamber. What are you proposing, Admiral? Victoria turned her attention to him. She had read his file and knew he was one of the few council members who understood the necessity of what had been done. I propose we establish a new military doctrine for the Galactic Council, not one based on defense and retreat, but on rapid response and total neutralization of threats. I propose that humans train your species in actual combat tactics, not the ceremonial warfare you have been practicing. You want to turn us into predators like yourselves, someone accused. No, Victoria said. I want to teach you how to survive in a universe that does not care about your philosophies. You can keep your cultures, your values, your ways of life. But when danger comes, you need to know how to end it permanently, not just push it away to threaten you again later. The debate that followed lasted for 6 hours. Some species voted immediately against any human military involvement. They saw humanity as dangerous, a species too comfortable with violence, too willing to sacrifice. Others, particularly those who had lost colonies to the Ravagers, voted in favor. They had buried enough dead to understand that survival sometimes required hard choices. The final vote was 17 in favor, 9 against, and 3 abstentions. It passed by the narrowest of margins. Humanity would be designated as an emergency response species for the Galactic Council. When threats emerged that required immediate and overwhelming force, humans would be called first. Rebecca Torres stood before the council after the vote. her expression carefully neutral. We accept this responsibility, but understand something clearly. When you call for human help, we will respond with human methods. We will not follow your rules of engagement if they compromise the mission. We will not show mercy to enemies that deserve none, and we will do whatever is necessary to protect innocent lives. She paused. If you cannot accept that, do not call us. 3 months later, human patrol fleets spread across Council space. They were small groups, never more than 10 ships, positioned at strategic points throughout the galaxy. Their mission was simple: respond to any emergency within 6 hours and neutralize the threat with maximum efficiency. The galaxy adjusted to this new reality slowly. Some species welcomed the human presence, feeling safer with predator-designed vessels guarding their borders. Others resented it, seeing the humans as a necessary evil at best and a future threat at worst. Torin visited Earth during this transition period, wanting to understand the species that had saved his people. He stood in the headquarters of Human Space Command, looking at a wall covered with photographs. These were the crew members who had died during the Ravager campaign. 317 faces, each one someone who had volunteered to risk everything for aliens they had never met. Victoria Cross found him there, staring at the memorial. "We honor them," she said quietly. "Every life lost is remembered. Every sacrifice is recorded. We do not forget the price of our actions." "Why do you do this?" Torin asked. "Your species has been in space for such a short time. You could have stayed on Earth, ignored the Council, lived in peace. Why risk your lives for strangers?" Victoria was quiet for a moment, considering the question. "Do you know what humans called our planet before we reached space?" She asked. "We called it hell. Earth tried to kill us in every way possible. Predators, diseases, natural disasters, extreme climates. We survived by learning to work together, to protect the weak, to fight against anything that threatened our survival." She looked at the wall of photographs. "When we reached space and found other species, we saw the same thing we saw in our own history. People trying to survive in a dangerous universe. How could we not help? We have 10,000 years of experience fighting impossible odds. It would be wrong to keep that knowledge to ourselves." "Even if it means more of your people will die?" Torin asked. "Especially then," Victoria replied, "because we understand that some things are worth dying for. Peace, safety, the chance for children to grow up without fear. We paid for those things on Earth with oceans of blood over thousands of years. Now we can help the galaxy achieve them faster with less suffering. That is worth any cost." 6 months after the Ravager campaign, the galaxy had settled into a new normal. Human response fleets had already dealt with 3 separate incidents: a pirate armada attacking trade routes, a rogue AI warship that had escaped its creators, and a species attempting to conquer its neighbor through biological warfare. In each case, humans responded with overwhelming force and ended the threats permanently. The Council species began to notice patterns. Human fleets did not get smaller when threats were eliminated. They grew larger. More shipyards appeared in human-controlled space. More weapons research. More training facilities. Humanity was preparing for something. Some delegates grew concerned. They raised questions in council sessions about human militarization. Were the humans becoming too powerful? Too dangerous? What if they decided the council itself was a threat? Rebecca Torres addressed these concerns directly. "You are right to be worried," she said, standing before the assembled delegates. "We are building a military force unlike anything the galaxy has seen. We are developing weapons that could destroy worlds. We are training soldiers in methods of warfare you find horrifying." She looked around the chamber. "But understand why. We have seen your history. We have studied every conflict, every war, every threat you have faced in 10,000 years of recorded civilization. And we have found a pattern." She activated a holographic display showing the timeline of galactic history. Red markers indicated major conflicts. They appeared with disturbing regularity. Every 200 years on average, something emerges that threatens galactic peace. The Ravagers, the Synthesis Plague, the Dark Star Collective. Each time, the Council barely survives. Billions die. Entire species go extinct. You recover, rebuild, and then it happens again. The display shifted, showing human projections for the future. According to our calculations, the galaxy is overdue for the next major threat. It could be another hive mind. It could be an invasion from another galaxy. It could be something we have not even imagined. But it is coming. And when it arrives, you will need us to be ready. So you build weapons to fight an enemy that may not exist? The Threen ambassador asked. We build weapons to fight an enemy that will definitely exist, Rebecca corrected. We just do not know what form it will take yet. That is why we prepare for everything. The council could not argue with the logic, even if they disliked the implications. Humanity had proven its effectiveness. The methods were brutal, the philosophy was frightening, but the results were undeniable. The galaxy was safer with human warships on patrol. 1 year after the Ravager campaign, a new signal reached the council chamber. It came from beyond the outer veil, from the uncharted regions of space that no council ship had ever explored. The signal was weak, but the message was clear. A distress call. Something in the darkness needed help. The council debated for 3 hours. Sending ships into unknown space was dangerous. They had no maps, no knowledge of what lay beyond the boundary. It could be a trap. It could be a hoax. It could be the prelude to the very threat Rebecca Torres had warned about. Before the vote could be called, Victoria Cross's face appeared on the communication screen. She had been listening to the debate from her flagship, which was positioned near the outer veil. Her expression was calm, but there was something in her eyes that Torin recognized now. The look of a predator that had caught a scent. We will go, Victoria said simply. You do not need to vote. You do not need to authorize it. Someone called for help and humans answer. That is what we do. You do not know what is out there, a delegate protested. You could be flying into something far worse than the Ravagers. Victoria smiled, and it was the same expression Rebecca Torres had worn a year ago, when she first volunteered the human fleet. Then we will learn how to fight it. We always do. The transmission ended. Within the hour, a human expeditionary fleet of 30 vessels crossed the boundary into the outer veil. They did not know what they would find. They did not know if they would return. But they went anyway because that was the nature of predators who had learned to protect instead of hunt. The galaxy watched them go and wondered what would come back. Would it be the humans victorious once again? Or would it be something else, something that had been waiting in the darkness for prey stupid enough to enter its domain? Only time would tell. But one thing was certain. The galaxy had changed forever. The age of defensive warfare and moral hesitation was ending. The age of humanity's predator fleets had begun. And in the depths of uncharted space, something ancient stirred, sensing the approach of new prey. It had been hunting in the darkness for eons, consuming entire civilizations that dared to cross the boundary. It anticipated another easy meal. It had no way of knowing that for the first time in its existence it was about to encounter something that could hunt back. The emergency broadcast cut through every communication channel in the Galactic Council chambers. Static filled the air before a weak voice broke through, trembling with terror and pain. The Velrathi colonist could barely speak between sobs as she described the horrors unfolding on her peaceful farming world. Buildings burned in the background of the transmission. Screams echoed through the feed. Children crying for parents who would never answer again. Counselor Tharn, a tall crystalline being from the Methodian system, stood frozen as the broadcast played. His translucent body flickered with distress signals that his species used to communicate emotion. Around the circular chamber, representatives from 40 different worlds watched in horror as the footage showed Kralix warriors dragging civilian prisoners into transport ships. The Kralix Empire had no interest in negotiation or surrender. They came to conquer, to enslave, and to spread fear across the outer colonies. The Velrathi were botanists and philosophers. Their entire civilization revolved around growth, patience, and understanding. They had no weapons, no armies, no concept of organized violence. For 3,000 years they lived in peace, sharing their agricultural innovations with anyone who asked. Now they were being punished for that very gentleness. The Kralix warlords saw weakness and pounced like scavengers on a dying animal. Tharn turned to face his fellow council members. His voice resonated through the chamber with crystalline clarity. The situation demanded immediate response, but military reality painted a grim picture. The nearest Council defense fleet was stationed 4 systems away, Nearly 3 weeks travel time, even at maximum, faster than light speed. By the time they arrived, the Velrathi colony would be nothing but ash and memories. The Kraliks would have already moved to their next target, strengthened by new slaves and resources. Counselor Vess, a 6-legged creature covered in thick armor plating, suggested a diplomatic solution. Perhaps they could negotiate, offer the Kraliks something of value in exchange for Velrathi lives. Other council members murmured agreement, desperately grasping for any option that might save their peaceful allies. But everyone in that chamber knew the truth. The Kraliks did not negotiate. They took what they wanted and destroyed anything that resisted. In the back of the council chamber, almost forgotten in the shadows, stood Ambassador Reeves from Earth. Humans had only joined the Galactic Council 8 months ago, still considered newcomers by species who measured history in millennia. Most council members avoided the human section entirely. Earth had been classified as a Class 12 death world, one of the most dangerous planetary environments ever discovered. The fact that any species evolved there at all seemed impossible. The fact that they reached space travel was terrifying. Reeves listened to the debate with growing frustration. Her people were being discussed in whispers, treated like dangerous animals kept in a cage. The other species feared what humans represented. They had read the reports about Earth's history, seen the archaeological evidence of countless wars and extinctions. Humanity carried the genetic markers of apex predators, hunters who climbed to the top of their food chain through persistence, intelligence, and an unsettling refusal to quit. Other species ran from danger or hid from threats. Humans turned toward danger and destroyed it. Tharn finally acknowledged the human presence in the room. His crystalline voice carried reluctance and barely concealed fear. Perhaps the humans had military assets closer to Velrathi space. Perhaps their primitive aggression could serve a purpose for once. The other council members shifted uncomfortably, pseudopods and tentacles and energy fields all betraying their anxiety. Asking humans for help meant unleashing something they did not fully understand. Reeves stepped forward into the center of the chamber. She was not particularly tall by human standards, but something about her movement made the alien representatives pull back instinctively. Humans moved differently than other species. Every motion carried purpose and controlled energy. Predator mechanics hiding behind a diplomatic smile. The ambassador accessed the human military network with practiced efficiency. Within seconds, she had response times, asset locations, and tactical readiness reports flowing across her neural implant. The other species still relied on external devices for information processing. Humans integrated technology directly into their bodies, another unsettling reminder of how different they were, how dangerous. Earth's 3rd Expeditionary Fleet was conducting training exercises only 4 days' travel from Velrathi space. Reeves transmitted the distress call to Fleet Commander Watson without waiting for council approval. The response came back in under 30 seconds. Full deployment authorization granted. All ships breaking from exercises and proceeding to maximum combat readiness. Estimated arrival time 73 hours. The council chamber erupted in shocked chatter. 73 hours was impossible. No species could cover that distance so quickly without tearing their ships apart from stress. The faster-than-light mathematics did not allow for such speeds. Yet humans consistently broke assumptions about what was possible. They took risks that seemed suicidal to other species and somehow survived. Tharn demanded to know how humans intended to arrive so quickly. Reeves explained that Earth vessels used a modified drive system that other species considered too dangerous for practical use. It required sustained acceleration that would crush most alien species into paste. But humans evolved in 3 times standard gravity, with skeletal structures designed to handle enormous physical stress. What killed other species merely felt uncomfortable to human crews. Vess raised concerns about human rules of engagement. The Galactic Council maintained strict guidelines about military conflict. Measured force, proportional response, minimal casualties whenever possible. Humans had signed those agreements, but many council members doubted whether a species born from violence could truly restrain themselves in battle. Reeves assured them that Commander Watson understood the rules perfectly. Human forces would operate within all established guidelines. They would attempt to minimize casualties and secure the safety of Velrathi civilians. The ambassador spoke with calm confidence, but something flickered behind her eyes that made the alien observers uncomfortable. Humans had very different definitions of mercy than other species. The Council voted to authorize human intervention. 23 in favor, 11 against, 6 abstentions. Those who voted against cited concerns about setting a dangerous precedent. Once humans were unleashed in military operations, could they truly be controlled? But the screams still echoing from the Velrathi distress call made the decision inevitable. Sometimes you had to accept help from monsters to stop worse monsters. Reeves transmitted final authorization codes to the Third Fleet. Across 4 light-years of space, human warships received their orders simultaneously. Training exercises ended immediately. Weapon systems powered up from standby to full combat readiness. Crews secured for maximum acceleration burns that would test the limits of even enhanced human endurance. Commander Watson stood in the operations center of the flagship Relentless Tide. Around him, tactical displays showed real-time data from every ship in the fleet, 37 warships ranging from fast attack corvettes to massive battle carriers. Over 15,000 human personnel trained for one purpose, honed to one edge. War. Watson opened a fleet-wide channel. His voice carried across every vessel simultaneously, reaching every crew member regardless of their current duty station. The message was simple, only 2 words that every human understood instinctively. 2 words that changed everything about how they operated, how they thought, how they fought. Predator mode. Every ship in the Third Fleet went completely dark. Engines switched to silent running profiles. Communication systems cut to narrow beam encrypted channels. Sensor baffles deployed, making the human vessels nearly invisible to conventional detection. To the Kralix Empire and their advanced monitoring stations, it appeared that the human fleet simply vanished from existence. But the humans were still there, still moving, still accelerating toward their target. They were not running or hiding. They were doing what their species had done for millions of years on their savage homeworld. They were hunting. Warlord Krathix reclined in his command throne aboard the dreadnought Crimson Fang, watching the Velrathi colony burn on his primary view screen. Smoke rose from a dozen settlements, painting the peaceful world in shades of gray and black. His warriors had performed admirably, crushing all resistance in less than 6 hours. Not that there had been much resistance to crush. The Velrathi barely understood the concept of fighting back. The warlord's forearms gestured lazily toward his tactical officer, a younger Kralix warrior with fresh battle scars still healing across his chest plates. Report on the prisoners, how many captured for the slave markets, how much valuable technology and resources secured for the Empire. The numbers pleased Krathix greatly. This colony alone would fund 3 more military campaigns. The Galactic Council grew weaker with each passing year, their pathetic peace treaties worthless against determined aggression. Around the Velrathi system, 17 Kralix warships maintained patrol orbits. Heavy cruisers equipped with weapons that could crack a planet's crust if necessary. Krathix did not expect any real opposition. Council defense fleets moved slowly, bound by bureaucracy and endless debates. By the time they authorized military action and dispatched ships, the Kralix would have stripped the system clean and moved on to the next target. The Empire had perfected this strategy over decades of expansion. The first explosion came without warning. One moment the patrol cruiser Blood Talon was transmitting routine status updates. The next moment its reactor core detonated, spreading debris across 3,000 kilometers of space. Emergency alerts flooded the tactical network. Ship commanders demanded explanations, status reports, enemy positions, but sensors showed nothing. Empty space, no approaching vessels, no energy signatures that might indicate hostile forces. Krathix surged from his throne, roaring orders at his bridge crew. Find the attackers. Deploy all scanning arrays. Someone or something had just destroyed a Kralix cruiser and vanished without leaving any trace. His tactical officer worked frantically, cycling through every detection frequency available. Infrared, ultraviolet, subspace variance, gravitational distortion. Nothing registered. The attacker might as well have been a ghost. A second cruiser exploded on the far side of the planet. Then a third on the inner orbital path. Each time the result was identical. Devastating strikes that completely annihilated their targets, followed by absolute silence. No follow-up attacks, no demands for surrender, just calculated destruction delivered by an invisible enemy. Krathix felt something unfamiliar creeping into his mind, something the Kralix warlords rarely experienced. Fear. The tactical officer finally located something on the sensors. Not a ship, but an absence where a ship should be. A hole in space that bent light and energy around itself just enough to create a shimmer, if you knew where to look. The humans had arrived, and they brought technology that the Galactic Council had forbidden as too destabilizing for general use. Active camouflage combined with heat damping and sensor-defeating materials. The human vessels were not invisible, but they were close enough that conventional detection could not find them until they chose to reveal themselves. Krathix ordered his fleet to break orbit and prepare for emergency faster than light jumps. Running from battle went against every Kralix instinct, but fighting an enemy you could not see was suicide. His navigation officer began calculating escape vectors, searching for routes that would take them beyond whatever trap the humans had laid. The calculations took precious minutes. Minutes the humans used to close the net even tighter. On every view screen throughout the Kralix fleet, a new image appeared. A tactical display showing their entire formation in perfect detail. Each ship labeled with its designation, weapons capacity, and current power levels. The humans had been watching them for hours, mapping every vessel, learning every pattern. They knew exactly where each Kralix warship was positioned, and exactly how to destroy them all. Commander Watson's voice echoed across open communication channels. He spoke in perfectly translated Kralix dialect, ensuring every warrior heard his words clearly. The message was simple and delivered without emotion or anger. Just cold statement of fact. The Kralix had made the Velrathi suffer. They had tortured civilians for entertainment. They had broken every civilized rule of engagement. Now the humans would demonstrate what true predators could do when unleashed. The entire human fleet decloaked simultaneously. 37 warships materialized out of empty space, surrounding the Kralix formation in a perfect three-dimensional sphere. They had not just arrived at the system. They had been there for over an hour, silently maneuvering into optimal strike positions while the Kralix celebrated their victory over helpless farmers. Every human vessel had weapons locked on multiple targets. Every firing solution calculated and verified. Every escape route blocked. Krathix stared at the tactical display in growing horror. The human ships were smaller than Kralix dreadnoughts, less heavily armored with less powerful weapons on paper. But their positioning was flawless. They had anticipated every defensive formation the Kralix might use, and placed themselves to exploit every weakness. This was not how civilized species fought. This was ambush predator behavior. Wolves surrounding prey before the final strike. The warlord made a desperate decision. Target the planet itself. If they could threaten the remaining Velrathi civilians, perhaps the humans would negotiate. His weapons officer began charging the main guns, targeting population centers that still showed life signs. It was a cowardly tactic, using hostages as shields. But Kralix warriors cared nothing for honor when survival was at stake. Before the first shot could fire, the Crimson Fang shuddered from multiple impacts. Precision strikes disabled the main gun capacitors without breaching the hull. More human vessels appeared from behind the planet itself, having used the gravitational shadow to mask their approach even more effectively. They were inside the Kralix defensive perimeter now, moving with impossible speed and coordination. Each human ship operated as part of a larger organism, responding to tactical changes in microseconds. The Kralix fleet tried to return fire, but their targeting systems could not keep up with human evasion patterns. The warships from Earth moved like living creatures, spinning and diving through space with maneuvers that would kill most species from the sheer acceleration forces. Humans endured what others could not, pushing their bodies and ships beyond normal limits because they evolved in an environment that demanded such extremes. More Kralix vessels took damage, not destroyed but systematically disabled. Engines crippled, weapons offline, communication arrays severed. The humans were not trying to kill them quickly. They were taking away every option, every hope of escape or resistance. Piece by piece they stripped the Kralix fleet of its power and pride. Krathix received a priority transmission on his private command. Frequency. Impossible, that channel was encrypted, with quantum-locked codes that could not be broken by any known technology. Yet Commander Watson's image appeared on his personal display, speaking directly to him. The human looked unremarkable by most species standards. Average height, brown hair turning gray at the temples, facial features that betrayed no emotion whatsoever. Watson informed the warlord that human special forces teams had infiltrated the Crimson Fang 3 hours ago. during the initial chaos of the first explosions. They had been aboard the flagship ever since, moving through ventilation systems and maintenance tunnels, mapping the entire ship while Kralix warriors rushed past without noticing. Humans excelled at stealth when necessary, another gift from their predator evolution. They could be patient beyond reason, waiting and hiding until the perfect moment to strike. The human commander delivered his final message before cutting the transmission. Krathix had made a critical mistake. He had assumed that being big and loud and powerful made him dangerous, but the deadliest predators on Earth were never the largest. They were the ones who understood patience, strategy, and the art of turning prey's strengths into fatal weaknesses. The Kralix Empire had just learned what the rest of the galaxy was beginning to understand. Humans did not fight fair. They fought to win. The Kralix warriors inside the Crimson Fang attempted a counterattack, rushing toward key defensive positions with weapons drawn. They were trained fighters, each one capable of defeating multiple opponents in close combat. Their exoskeletons provided natural armor that could withstand most conventional weapons. For centuries, the Kralix had dominated ground battles through sheer physical superiority. But they had never fought humans at close range before. The first squad of Kralix soldiers never saw what killed them. Magnetic charges planted hours earlier detonated in critical junctions, sealing bulkheads and cutting off reinforcements. The corridor filled with smoke and confusion. Through that chaos, human special forces moved like shadows, striking from angles that should have been impossible. They used the ship's own structure against its defenders, turning every corner into a potential ambush point. Lieutenant Hayes led her team through the dreadnought's lower decks, following intelligence gathered during their initial infiltration. She wore light combat armor that seemed pathetically inadequate compared to Kralix battle gear, but the armor was designed for mobility rather than raw protection. Humans fought by not getting hit in the first place, using speed and unpredictability to compensate for their physical disadvantages. What they lacked in natural weapons or armor, they made up for with tactics and adaptability. The strike team reached the detention block where Velrathi prisoners were being held. Security systems that should have stopped any intruder had been bypassed hours ago by human engineers who understood alien technology better than most species understood their own systems. Humans learned quickly, absorbed information rapidly, and applied knowledge in unexpected ways, another gift from their predator ancestry, the ability to learn from prey and adapt their hunting strategies accordingly. Hayes triggered the cell door controls, releasing 47 Velrathi civilians who huddled in fear at the back of their holding area. They had been tortured for information and entertainment, broken in body and spirit by Kralix cruelty. The lieutenant approached slowly, keeping her weapon lowered and her voice gentle. She explained that help had arrived, that they were being rescued, that the nightmare was ending. The Velrathi stared at her in confusion. They had never seen a human before, did not understand what these strange primates represented. One of the younger Velrathi, barely more than a child by their species standards, asked the question that many were thinking. Why did the humans come? Why risk their lives for strangers on the other side of the galaxy? What did they hope to gain from interfering in Kralix expansion? Hayes paused before answering, searching for words that would translate properly through the universal language barrier. She told them that humans had a saying back on Earth. No one fights alone. When someone called for help, you answered. Simple as that. The concept seemed alien to the Velrathi, who had always relied on careful negotiation and mutual benefit arrangements. But humans operated on different principles. They formed bonds quickly and defended those bonds with irrational ferocity. It was a survival trait from their tribal past, evolved over millions of years of depending on pack cooperation. Above them, the space battle continued with increasing intensity. Kralix ships tried every tactical formation in their military database, attempting to break through the human blockade. They concentrated fire on individual targets, hoping to overwhelm and destroy at least one enemy vessel. The strategy should have worked. Basic mathematics said that 17 Kralix cruisers outgunned 37 smaller human ships. But mathematics did not account for human unpredictability. Commander Watson watched the battle unfold from his operations center, making adjustments with the precision of a chess master moving pieces across a board. Each human ship commander had authorization to make independent decisions based on local conditions, but they all worked toward the same objective. Disable, capture, contain. Not a single Kralix vessel could be allowed to escape and report back to their empire about human capabilities. The Kraliks made their largest tactical error when they tried to fight with honor. Their culture valued direct confrontation, facing enemies openly rather than using what they considered cowardly tactics. Humans had no such cultural limitations. They hit from unexpected angles, retreated when disadvantaged, and struck again before the enemy could adapt. It was asymmetric warfare refined over thousands of years of human history. Every species that had ever underestimated human persistence had learned the same painful lesson. 3 more Kraliks vessels lost main power, drifting helplessly as human boarding teams prepared to take control. The warriors aboard those ships barricaded themselves in defensible positions, ready to fight to the last soldier. But humans did not assault fortified positions when they could simply wait. They cut life support to occupied sections, forcing the Kraliks to choose between surrender and suffocation. It was brutal efficiency without wasted effort or unnecessary casualties. Warlord Krathik sat alone in his command center, watching his fleet fall apart around him. Every decision he made seemed to work in the humans' favor. Every strength his forces possessed somehow became a weakness when facing these death-world predators. The Kraliks were stronger, more durable, better armed by conventional measures. Yet they were losing because humans fought wars differently. They attacked morale and psychology as much as physical targets. The warlord's tactical officer reported that the Crimson Fang was being evacuated. Human forces had reached the engineering sections and were systematically shutting down critical systems. They moved through the ship like infection spreading through a body, inevitable and impossible to stop once it took hold. Krathiks had seen recordings of Earth predators hunting prey. The way they isolated targets wore them down through persistence, struck at vulnerable moments. His fleet was experiencing the space warfare equivalent. Hayes and her team escorted the freed Velrathi prisoners toward the docking bay, where human transport shuttles waited. They moved carefully through corridors still filled with armed Kraliks warriors, but resistance had largely collapsed. The enemy soldiers no longer fought with confidence. They had seen their impregnable dreadnought taken apart by opponents who seemed to anticipate every defense and counter every strategy. Fear was a powerful weapon, and humans wielded it expertly. In the detention block, Hayes had noticed something that made her blood run cold. Not just cells holding prisoners, but specialized chambers designed for extended torture. Equipment meant to cause maximum pain, while keeping victims alive for days or weeks. She had seen similar setups before, during peacekeeping operations on worlds where war crimes became routine. The sight always triggered the same response in human soldiers: cold rage that burned hotter than any momentary anger. She contacted Commander Watson directly, requesting permission to modify rules of engagement. The Kraliks had not just invaded and conquered. They had deliberately inflicted suffering for its own sake. That crossed lines that humans took very seriously. Watson listened to her report in silence before responding. His voice carried that same cold fury that every human understood instinctively. Permission granted. No survivors among those directly responsible for prisoner abuse. The message spread through the human fleet within seconds. Every team leader updated their target priorities accordingly. Kraliks warriors who fought defending their ships would be captured and treated according to interstellar law. But those who participated in torture and civilian murder would face immediate justice. Humans made distinctions that other species sometimes found arbitrary. They could show mercy to honorable enemies while being absolutely ruthless toward those who crossed certain moral boundaries. By the time Galactic Council observers arrived in their diplomatic vessels, the battle was effectively over. Every Kralik ship had been captured or disabled. No human vessels lost. No human casualties requiring medical evacuation. The efficiency was terrifying to species who thought of war as a costly necessity, rather than a perfected skill. Humans had turned violence into science, studying it across their entire history until they understood every aspect of conflict at a fundamental level. The observers requested permission to approach and begin negotiations. Watson granted the request but warned them not to interfere with ongoing operations. Justice was being served in a way that would ensure other aggressors thought carefully before attacking peaceful species under human protection. The galaxy was about to learn a lesson that prey animals never forgot. Predators remembered those who hurt their pack. The Council observer ships approached the Velrathi system with considerable nervousness. Diplomat Urith piloted the lead vessel, his tentacles trembling slightly as sensor data revealed the scope of human efficiency. 17. Kralix warships floated dead in space, their power cores shut down but hulls intact, not destroyed but captured completely. Around them, human vessels maintained patrol patterns that suggested absolute control over every cubic meter of local space. Ureth had served the Galactic Council for over 60 years, mediating conflicts between hundreds of species. He understood war as a necessary evil that civilized beings tried to minimize through negotiation and compromise. Quick battles followed by peace treaties, territory exchanges, reparations paid. The cycle of conflict and resolution that had governed galactic politics for millennia. But humans approached warfare with a different philosophy entirely. They did not fight to gain advantage. They fought to eliminate threats permanently. Commander Watson granted the diplomatic vessels permission to dock with the relentless tide. Ureth and his assistant observers transferred aboard, following human crew members through corridors that seemed cramped and uncomfortable by galactic standards. Everything about human ships felt wrong to other species. Too much gravity, too much oxygen in the air, temperature controls set higher than most beings preferred. The ships were not designed for comfort but for function, built to support crews who could endure conditions that would hospitalize other species. Watson met them in what humans called a conference room. Though it held no comfortable furniture or ambient lighting designed to promote calm discussion, just a basic table, chairs built for human proportions, and wall-mounted displays showing tactical data. The commander looked tired but alert, dark circles under his eyes suggesting he had not slept since the operation began. Humans could push themselves beyond normal biological limits when necessary, running on stimulants and willpower long after their bodies should have collapsed. Ureth began with standard diplomatic protocols, thanking the humans for their rapid response and offering council assistance with prisoner processing. Watson cut him off politely but firmly. The humans were not interested in council assistance. This was their operation, and they would see it through to completion according to their own standards. The statement made Ureth's tentacles curl with anxiety. Human standards were precisely what worried the council most. The displays activated, showing footage from the Kralix detention blocks. Ureth watched in growing horror as evidence of systematic torture and civilian murder played out in graphic detail. His assistant observers made distressed sounds in various alien languages. They had known intellectually that the Kralix committed atrocities, but seeing the proof was different. Seeing what intelligent beings could do to other intelligent beings when power went unchecked, Watson explained that human forces had documented everything. Every prisoner held, every injury inflicted, every Kralix warrior responsible for specific crimes. His people had spent hours interviewing survivors, gathering testimony, building cases that would stand up to legal scrutiny. This was not revenge or mob justice. This was systematic prosecution of war criminals, according to standards that humans had developed over centuries of learning from their own dark history. Ureth suggested that executing the Kralix officers would be cleaner and more merciful. Quick deaths rather than prolonged legal proceedings. The council had precedent for such actions when dealing with truly irredeemable aggressors. But Watson rejected the suggestion immediately. Death was easy. Death was what the Kralix had given their victims. Human justice demanded something more meaningful: accountability. The commander led the observers to one of the human transport ships that had been converted into a temporary tribunal chamber. Inside, Kralix warriors stood in restraints while Velrathi survivors faced them directly. Human legal officers administered the proceedings, ensuring every accusation could be supported by evidence, and every accused had opportunity to respond. It was slower than summary execution, but carried weight that death could never achieve. One Kralix officer, a squad leader named Vexthor, stood accused of personally torturing 12 Velrathi civilians, including 5 children. The evidence was overwhelming. Video recordings from Kralix equipment, testimony from multiple witnesses, medical documentation of injuries that could only have resulted from deliberate cruelty. Vexthor did not deny the charges. Instead, he claimed that he was following orders, doing what warriors were expected to do when conquering inferior species. The human judge, a woman named Lancaster who had served in legal corps for 20 years, listened without visible emotion. Then she delivered a sentence that made Ureth's circulatory system run cold: life imprisonment with full memory retention and mandatory psychological counseling. Vexthor would spend the rest of his existence reliving what he had done, forced to confront the reality of his victim's suffering never allowed to forget or rationalize or minimize his crimes. To species that viewed death as the ultimate punishment, this seemed needlessly cruel. But humans understood something that many aliens did not. Death ended suffering for the guilty party. Living with consequences was far more difficult. The Kralliks would face their victims every day in memory, unable to escape or pretend their actions had been justified. That was human justice at its most refined and terrible. The proceedings continued for days, each case examined individually, each sentence tailored to specific crimes. The humans demonstrated patience that seemed inhuman in its consistency. They never rushed, never showed anger or disgust despite the horrific nature of evidence presented. They approached war crimes prosecution with the same methodical efficiency they brought to combat operations. Word of the human tribunals spread rapidly through galactic communication networks. Other aggressive species who had been planning expansion campaigns suddenly reconsidered their strategies. The Kralliks were not unique in their brutality. Dozens of civilizations used similar tactics when conquering weaker neighbors. But now they faced a new calculation. Losing battles meant temporary setbacks. Losing to humans meant permanent consequences that followed individuals rather than governments. Ureth met privately with Watson after observing 3 days of tribunal proceedings. He expressed counsel concerns that human methods were too harsh, too focused on individual punishment rather than systemic peace agreements. Other species needed to know they could surrender without facing such extensive legal consequences. Watson's response was simple and absolute. If they wanted to avoid consequences, they should avoid committing war crimes. The concept seemed obvious to humans, but radical to species who separated military actions from moral judgment. The commander showed Ureth footage from Velrathi settlements after the rescue operations concluded, survivors slowly rebuilding their lives with human assistance, medical teams treating physical and psychological trauma, engineers repairing infrastructure damaged during the invasion. Humans did not just fight and leave. They committed to recovery and reconstruction, viewing it as part of their responsibility once they intervened. One scene particularly affected Ureth, a young Velrathi child, barely old enough to understand what had happened, approached a human soldier and asked why the humans came to help. The soldier knelt down, bringing herself to the child's eye level, and gave the same explanation that Lieutenant Hayes had offered in the detention block. Because you called for help. Because no one should face monsters alone. Because protecting others was what humans did, regardless of species or distance or personal risk. The simplicity of that moral framework baffled Ureth. Most civilizations helped allies because of trade agreements, mutual defense pacts, or strategic advantage. Humans helped because someone needed help. It was pack bonding behavior elevated to interstellar scale, treating complete strangers as part of their social group worth protecting. Such thinking should have been a weakness. Instead, it made them more dangerous than any purely logical species could become. Back in the council chambers, emergency sessions debated how to respond to human military actions. Some wanted to impose restrictions, force humans to follow more conventional rules of engagement. Others argued that attempting to restrict the only species capable of stopping aggressive expansion would be suicidal policy. The debate raged for weeks while human fleets remained on station in Velrathi space, ensuring no follow-up attacks could occur. Then 3 separate distress calls arrived simultaneously from different sectors. The Draknor Collective, the Xinthian Horde, and the Margath Swarm had all launched coordinated strikes against Council member worlds. They assumed human intervention in Krallik's territory was an isolated incident, a lucky victory that would not be repeated. They assumed wrong. Ambassador Reeves stood before the Council and made a simple statement. Human forces were deploying to all 3 conflict zones immediately. The Council could support the operations or stay out of the way, but human ships were already moving. Watson had told the galaxy that predators remember those who hurt their pack. Now it was time to make sure everyone understood what that meant. The 3 aggressive empires had planned their attacks carefully. They studied the Krallik's defeat and concluded that humans won through luck and surprise rather than genuine military superiority. The Draknor Collective possessed technology centuries ahead of Earth standards. The Xinthian Horde fielded armies that numbered in the millions. The Margath Swarm utilized biological weapons that could devastate entire ecosystems. Together, they represented overwhelming force that should have crushed any opposition. Admiral Torres commanded the human response from her flagship Resolution, coordinating operations across 3 separate combat zones simultaneously. She was younger than many expected for such responsibility, barely 40 years old by Earth standards, but humans promoted based on capability rather than age or political connections. Torres had proven herself in 2 previous conflicts, demonstrating the combination of tactical brilliance and ruthless efficiency that human military leadership required. The Draknor attacked the industrial world of Tarmakon, expecting to capture manufacturing facilities intact for their own use. Their fleet consisted of massive dreadnoughts equipped with particle beam weapons that could vaporize asteroids. Against such firepower, most species would have retreated and called for reinforcements. Human response vessels arrived within 6 days and immediately went on the offensive. Lieutenant Morrison led a squadron of fast attack ships against the Draknor formation, using tactics that seemed suicidal to conventional military thinking. Instead of engaging at safe distances, human vessels closed to point-blank range where Draknor weapons could not track fast enough. They darted between the massive dreadnoughts like insects harassing predators too large to catch them. Each pass delivered precision strikes against sensor arrays and communication systems, blinding the Draknor fleet piece by piece. The Draknor commanders grew frustrated, attempting to swat the human ships with weapons designed for capital ship combat. They might as well have tried to use a sledgehammer on mosquitoes. Humans exploited every limitation in enemy systems, turning advanced technology into a liability through unconventional tactics. While the Draknor scrambled to adapt, human boarding teams infiltrated their flagship using stolen security codes and inside knowledge of Draknor ship design. The Xinthian horde chose different prey, attacking the residential colony of Parth Minor. They relied on overwhelming numbers, sending wave after wave of soldiers to simply drown defenders through attrition. Against most species, this strategy worked perfectly, but humans had faced similar tactics throughout their own history, developing counter-strategies that required discipline and calculated violence in equal measure. Commander Garrett set up defensive positions using Parth Minor's natural terrain, channeling Xinthian forces into kill zones where human weapons had maximum effect. His troops were outnumbered 50-1, impossible odds by any logical calculation. Yet they held their positions with mechanical precision, firing controlled bursts that dropped multiple enemies per shot. Humans trained for marksmanship to a degree that seemed obsessive to other species. Every bullet counted because every bullet was aimed. The Xinthian commanders threw more troops forward, assuming the defenders would eventually run out of ammunition or collapse from exhaustion. They did not understand human physiology at its extremes. Human soldiers could fight for days on minimal sleep, pushing through pain and fatigue that would incapacitate other species. Evolution on a death world meant adapting to survive when conditions exceeded normal tolerances. The trait translated into military endurance that bordered on supernatural. The Margath swarm represented the most dangerous threat, deploying biological weapons against the agricultural world of Fries. Genetically engineered plagues that targeted specific species while leaving Margath forces immune. It was warfare designed to exterminate rather than conquer, erasing populations so the swarm could claim empty territory. Human medical ships arrived as the first plague symptoms appeared among Freya's civilians. Dr. Patel coordinated the medical response with the same intensity that combat commanders brought to battle. Humans studied diseases with ferocity born from fighting countless plagues throughout their own history. Viruses, bacteria, parasites, prions. Earth had thrown every biological threat imaginable at humanity, and humans had survived by becoming expert at fighting microscopic enemies. The Margath plagues were sophisticated, but followed predictable patterns that human medical science recognized instantly. Within 72 hours, human researchers had developed countermeasures for all 3 Margath bioweapons. More importantly, they created an aggressive counterplague specifically engineered to target Margath biology. When the swarm's forces landed to claim what they thought would be a dead world, they found healthy Freya's civilians protected by human medicine, and Margath soldiers dying from their own tactics turned against them. Biological warfare was like any other tool. Effectiveness depended on who wielded it and how well they understood the principles involved. Admiral Torres watched reports flow in from all 3 combat zones. Draknor forces cut off from Central Command and surrendering systematically. Xanthian troops retreating in chaos after human counterattacks shattered their numerical advantage. Margath swarm vessels fleeing the system as their biological weapons proved worse than useless. 3 separate campaigns that should have taken months resolved in under 2 weeks. The efficiency terrified observers from species who thought they understood warfare. Humans fought with an intensity that seemed impossible to sustain. Yet they maintained that pace across multiple simultaneous operations. They did not get tired or distracted or overwhelmed by complexity. They escalated their response to match whatever opposition they faced, always finding another level of capability when required. Council diplomats arrived at all 3 locations, expecting to mediate peace terms and negotiate settlements. Instead, they found human forces already implementing reconstruction plans while processing enemy combatants through the same tribunal system used against the Kraliks. Accountability followed aggression like shadow follows light. Species who started wars learned that humans finished them permanently. Back on Earth, civilian populations watched combat reports with strange mixture of pride and concern. Their military had become the galaxy's enforcer by default, responding to threats that no one else could stop. It was a role humans neither sought nor could easily refuse. When you possessed capability to prevent atrocities and chose not to act, you became complicit through inaction. Humans could not watch others suffer and remain idle. Pack bonding instinct made inaction painful in ways other species struggled to understand. Months after the Triple Offensive ended, Galactic Council voted on formal proposals regarding human military authority. The debates were heated and contentious. Some species wanted strict limitations on human operations, fearing that today's protector could become tomorrow's conqueror. Others argued that attempting to restrict humans would simply drive them away from Council cooperation entirely. Neither option appealed to members who liked controlling outcomes through political maneuvering. Ambassador Reeves listened to the arguments with growing impatience. Finally, she requested permission to address the full Council assembly. Her statement was brief and direct. Humans did not seek authority over other species. They did not want to police the galaxy or impose their values on civilizations with different perspectives, but they would respond when peaceful beings called for help. That was not negotiable or subject to Council approval. She reminded the Assembly that Earth had been invited to join the galactic community as equals, not as subordinates who required permission to act according to their own moral standards. If the Council wanted human military support, they could accept that humans fought their own way using their own judgment. If they preferred, humans could withdraw entirely and let the Council handle future crises without interference. The choice belonged to the Council members. The vote that followed was not unanimous but overwhelming nonetheless. Formal recognition of human military autonomy, with request for continued cooperation on security matters. It was surrender disguised as partnership, acknowledgement that no one could control a species that evolved fighting their way to the top of the most dangerous food chain ever discovered. You either accepted humans as allies or hoped you never became their enemies. High Command received the Council decision with neither celebration nor complaint. They had never asked for permission and did not need validation. Every human officer understood their true responsibility: protect the pack, all of it, from the peaceful Velrothi farmers to species they had not even met yet. Distance and difference did not matter. When someone called for help, humans answered. Deep in unmapped space beyond Council territory, the ancient Korvath Empire watched these events with calculating interest. They had observed the galaxy for 1,000 years, planning eventual conquest once the younger species weakened themselves through petty conflicts. Their fleets numbered in the thousands. Their technology surpassed anything the Council possessed. They had been waiting for the perfect moment to sweep in and claim everything worth having. The Emperor reviewed intelligence reports about human military operations, studying tactical recordings and combat analysis. His senior advisors recommended proceeding with the invasion timeline. Humans were impressive for primitives, but could not possibly stand against Korvath might refined over millennia of warfare. One species that only reached space travel a few centuries ago could not threaten. An empire that conquered a dozen galaxies before Earth formed, but the Emperor had not maintained power for 300 years by underestimating potential threats. He watched humans fight and recognized something his advisors missed. Every other species in the galaxy treated war as unfortunate necessity or tool for advancement. Humans approached combat with the focused intensity of predators defending their territory. They did not fight to win battles. They fought to eliminate any threat to their pack completely and permanently. The Korvath Empire had crushed countless civilizations that possessed superior technology, greater numbers, or strategic advantages, but they had never faced a species that simply refused to quit, regardless of odds or consequences. The recordings showed human soldiers fighting wounded, human ships attacking when heavily damaged, human forces pressing forward when any logical species would have retreated. That was not military doctrine. That was instinct from millions of years hunting on a world that killed everything weaker than absolute determination. The Emperor made his decision. Invasion plans were postponed indefinitely. The target zone was marked as forbidden territory until further assessment could be completed. His advisors protested, citing overwhelming Korvath advantages in every measurable category. The Emperor silenced them with a gesture. Numbers and technology only mattered if your opponents fought the same kind of war you did. Humans did not fight that war. They fought as death-world predators, applying lessons learned from surviving conditions that would extinguish most other species. The galaxy had unleashed something it did not fully understand when it invited Earth to join the interstellar community. Not conquerors or explorers or merchants, humanity was a guard dog that bonded with everyone it met and defended them with lethal efficiency. The Korvath would wait and watch. Perhaps these humans would destroy themselves through internal conflict as violent species often did. Perhaps they would grow soft and lose their edge over generations of peace. Perhaps opportunity would present itself eventually. But for now, the most powerful empire in known space would avoid the one species that scared them. Because predators recognized other predators instinctively, and even apex hunters knew better than to challenge something that had fought its way to the top of hell itself. The galaxy belonged to humanity now, whether anyone admitted it or not through conquest or intimidation, but through simple demonstration that when humans said no one fights alone, they meant everyone, every species, every world, every being that called for help. The Death Worlders had been unleashed, and they were just getting started.